When is cutting off the right thing to do? In this video, we're going to review a recent video. We're going to watch along. It's by the Scottish Fairy, and it's titled How My Family Canceled Me and Why I'm Still Leading a Happy Life. This is her experience as the black sheep. Let's explore when cutting ties makes sense. Regardless of where you are in the estrangement dynamic, empathy is the key to breaking the cycle of intolerance. It allows us to honor the right of individuals to prioritize their well-being over societal or family expectations. And it will help us hopefully foster a culture of understanding and compassion for diverse life choices. I'm Marie Morin. I'm a therapist and an estrangement coach. Let's get started. Her tale reveals the raw pain and gradual realization that comes when you prioritize your mental health, even at the cost of severing familial ties. Let's take a closer look at her story, diving deeper into what it means to be sensitive, to be empathetic to her experience and how it mirrors situations many have faced in their own lives. Let's watch.
Hello everyone. I hope you had a lovely week. I have talked about my family and myself in some of my vlogs. How I felt like the black sheep, how I felt I do not belong, and how my being different became an issue. Today, I would like to talk about how my family cancelled me. When I grew up and was aligning with what was expected of me, my family seemed happy and accepting. It was only when I started to act on my feeling of being different that this changed. My wish to live a different life, to not follow the conventional foreseen path, fell on judgmental ears. It was in my 20s that things really changed, when I was confident in knowing that I needed to follow my own path, a different path. My going to live and work in France for a while was met with indifference and negative reactions. Whatever I did after was the subject of conversation. Often I felt like I was on trial for things I did. If I had a boyfriend from a wealthy family, I was a gold digger. If I was losing weight to a small size, I was probably ill. When I became a single mother, I should have foreseen that. It must have been my fault. There came a time when I stopped telling my family about the specifics of my life. I wasn't willing to be subject to their judging, their jealousy, and their bitterness. When I relocated to Scotland, I felt like a burden was lifted off me for several reasons, but one of them was that I knew I would not be exposed to gossip and harshness any longer.
Growing up under the watchful eyes of her family, the Scottish Fairy lived with the weight of their expectations. And this is something most of us can relate to. Our family often expects us to live, think, and act in a way that aligns with their ideals, leaving little room for our own individuality. And as she began to assert her independence and pursuing her different path, and ultimately she moved to France for a while, the judgment and criticism from her siblings began. And for her family, all right, her choice probably felt like a rejection of their shared traditions. But for her, it was a necessary move to live authentically. And if you've ever been in a similar situation, whether it's choosing a career your family didn't approve of or moving to a new city, you took away something from the familial nest, okay? You understand the conflicting emotions. On the one hand, there's this sense of like liberation. And on the other, there's this heavy burden of guilt, like, oh my God, what am I doing? I must be selfish because I'm pursuing my happiness. All right, let's watch again.
I would not be exposed to gossip and harshness any longer. I had accepted that my immediate family, besides my father, would never support and embrace the person I am. Throughout the years of my sons and my living in Scotland, we visited my father many times, and of course my family as well. Those meetings were never easy. I kept the conversation shallow and talked about non-personal things. On one of these occasions, I bumped into my younger sister by coincidence. Her reaction was not being surprised to see me or asking how I or my son were, how our life in Scotland went. Instead, she told me about her day at work, her dogs, and simply ignored the fact that I was visiting from abroad. Although all those meetings were difficult, I kept the peace. I did not act on the deliberate acts to continue to be provoking on whatever I had chosen for my life. I kept the peace for my father. I did not want him to having to deal with quarrels. We all were his children, and I did not want him to worry.
So her recount of the toxic dynamics within her family is especially heartbreaking. She mentions being judged, criticized, and unsupported, and while this toxicity might sound loud or overt, in many families it operates more subtly. Toxic behaviors don't always come in the form of screaming matches or dramatic confrontations, right? Instead, they can happen like what happened between her and her sister, an absolute like invalidation, this iciness, passive-aggressive comments, or the quiet withholding of love, excitement, and approval. Particularly painful moment there of being now with her sister, and her sister completely annihilating the importance that she happened to be there and that she was welcomed, that they were together. This did not happen. And as she describes, visiting the family became an emotionally draining ordeal. She had to do a lot of suppressing. They were unwelcoming. And if you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family where the interactions leave you feeling diminished rather than uplifted, her story likely hits close to home. I once worked with someone who described these emotions vividly. And she said something like, I feel like I'm at the party, but I wasn't invited. There's a loneliness that comes from being physically present in a family setting, yet emotionally excluded. And for many, like this Scottish fairy, who says it so beautifully, this dynamic plants the seeds of estrangement long before an actual cutoff occurs. Let's listen for more.
I have spoken about my late father before. He was a kind, caring, intelligent, funny, and very unique person. We regularly had long phone conversations to see how the other was doing. And then there came the time when my father had a stroke and was critically ill. As soon as possible, I had my son excused from school to fly to Germany and see him, as there was also the question of his life support should anything turn for the worse. I stayed in a hotel that time. None of my sisters were interested in knowing when or if he would be able to come, even though I made contact via chat many times with questions that were ignored. I got to see my father, who was on the mend, much to our relief. So I went on holiday with my son that was pre-booked long before this and that I had saved up for a wee while. Still ignored by most of my questions, I phoned the hospital from afar as I felt something was going on reading some of the messages in the chat and learned that my father's health had taken another turn and that he was dying. I considered flying to Germany again, but I did not. I did not want my lovely father to die with a tense atmosphere around him. We know that people who are no longer masters of their senses can still sense many things, especially emotions.
So what a heartbreaking point in this story, and yet we see her in such a self-sacrificial way for her dad to not show up just for her own benefit, but to provide a less stressful place for him to do his transition. And we also see that in her efforts to maintain over time her relationship with her father, she did suppress her feelings about her siblings. And this internal conflict, where you suppress pain and frustration to keep the peace, is something many people with estranged families understand deeply. And it's a self-sacrificial act, swallowing your emotions so that you don't cause additional stress for someone you care about. And in this context, her decision highlights a greater societal issue. The question is, why are individuals who prioritize their well-being often seen as selfish? Why do we expect people to tolerate mistreatment for the sake of maintaining family unity? These questions challenge traditional family values and open the door to a larger conversation about what family truly means.
So, my father passed away. I was not part in any of the arrangements afterwards. I was never included in the preparations for his funeral, his wake, or his inheritance. I also never asked again to be part of that, as I had learned that my questions would remain ignored. I got an invitation to my own father's funeral in the mail and flew to attend the funeral in my own way, not as part of the family. I had a lovely group of friends supporting me on this very difficult day. I had known for a long time that the time my father would pass away, I would cut ties with my immediate family.
So she decides not to go to her dad's bedside, but she does choose to go to his funeral. How heartbreaking that she had to get an invitation. But what I love about this story, and that I see with many of the people I work with is this ability to be resilient. And that is, she decided, you know what, this is my dad. I want to celebrate his life. I want to be there. I want to be a part of honoring my father. I am going to make sure that I have people around me. I'm going to have a community. These are my kin now. These are the people that get me. They understand me. They love me. They support me. And what a sad, sad thing that she could not get it where she deserved it with her siblings, that they all couldn't have this legacy that her father had shared of being this kind, loving man. And yet they chose to be jealous and unhappy with their sister. But she chose to say, you know what, I am not going to let this take me down. I'm going to continue to live and honor his legacy of being this kind, loving man. So she chose to prioritize her mental health. And while it was liberating, it also it allowed her to redefine her life on her own terms. And it did come with challenges, okay? So she didn't have this relationship with these people, but she still had the scars of toxic relationships. This part of the story reminds me of another woman that I know who distanced herself from her family, and after years of enduring relentless criticism like the Scottish Fairy, she found a new sense of freedom. But she often struggled with the societal judgment, all right, that accompanied her decision. People look at you like you're heartless, she told me. but they don't really know how much you've endured. And the burden of societal judgment is a recurring theme in these narratives. Society values family unity so highly that any deviation from this is often met with scrutiny, misunderstanding, or hostility. And this reflects the broader discomfort we have when someone prioritizes individual well-being over the collective traditions. Now, I make no mistake, I believe in the beauty of family. I think that there is very few things that honor a life well lived than the ability to be in a family, okay, and to have family support, have people in your corner that you're related to. It's amazing, but not everybody has that blessing. Not everybody has that benefit. And when it's toxicity, I think it's important for us to understand as individuals, especially if we've been on the receiving end of some brutal cutoffs. I think it's important for us to look at this in the scheme of the spectrum of what could happen, that there's not always a cutoff because someone is unreasonable or irrational or erratic. Sometimes there are really horrible things that they have endured. Now, if you're on that other side, please tell me in the comments what has happened for you. Okay, let's watch for more.
I had known for a long time that the time my father would pass away, I would cut ties with my immediate family. So when my family cancelled me, their cruelty and deliberate acts did not have the effect they wished for. I hadn't even considered that my family had in fact cancelled me. It was only some months ago when my niece, who I kept in touch with, worded it this way, how she thought it was wrong, and when she investigated with my sisters to find out about why they had treated me that way, they had given her no answer. But they all agreed that I was my father's favorite child. What a crime to commit. I have a very happy life now. I feel sad to having to say that I do not come from a loving and caring family, that my father's legacy of kindness does not live on in all my siblings. We never choose our family, but we can choose to live a life we deserve. Everyone deserves love, understanding, happiness, and support. We can choose a different path. We can choose another kind of family. We can choose to still be happy besides all the unhappiness in the world.
So, and she described her relationship with her father as a crime because she was so close to him, and the crime of is really in the jealousy and resentment of her sisters. That this is the fuel sometimes of family estrangement, especially when one is perceived as the favorite or too close. And these accusations add another layer of pain to an already strained relationship, making reconciliation even more difficult. And this part of the story, the Scottish fairy's resilience again shines through. Her decision to protect her peace, move forward, reflects this incredible strength and her acknowledgement of the complex emotions surrounding family estrangement, and it's both validating and inspiring. The rest of the video, she has some lovely things that she does. You might want to watch that. But being sensitive to the Scottish fairy story means that we're empathetic, right? We're understanding the nuances, that estrangement isn't this one-size-fits-all. You can't explain it really easily. It's rarely a simple decision. It's a process filled with emotional turmoil, internal conflict, and societal pressure. And it means recognizing that her choice to prioritize her mental health was not an act of selfishness, but one of self-preservation. And it also helps us to reflect on our own relationship and the broader cultural norms that shape them. What do we label individuals who prioritize being safe and having their mental health over toxic ties as selfish? What do we think about that? Why do we uphold the ideal of family unity, even if it comes at the cost of personal well-being? These are really difficult questions, but they are crucial for fostering empathy and understanding. So the Scottish fairy's journey is not just her own, it's a mirror of so many of the struggles that people face in navigating the complexities of family, mental health, and societal expectations. And by listening to her story and being sensitive to her perspective, we take a step toward a more compassionate and understanding society, one that values individuals' well-being. Yes, we love the idea of family, but we also understand that we need to honor each other. Some people have been on the receiving end and say, oh, you know what, well, this isn't my story. We haven't been toxic. And if this is you, what do you think contributed to your estrangement? I would really like to know. And if you like this video, hit the like, subscribe, and ring the bell. We'll see you in the next video.